Vyasena gratitam puranam madhye mahabharatam Advaitamritavashinim bhagavatim ashtadashatyayinim Ambatvamanusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshani Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullara Vindaya Tapatra Netra Yena Tvaya
Bhattacharya Purnaha
Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipa Prapanna Parijataya Totre
Kapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamritaduhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavaha Dodha Gopalanandanaha Arto Vatsasudirvokta Duktam Gitamritam Mahatu Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Bhishma Drona Tata Jayadratala Gandhara Nilotpala Shayagrahavati Kripena Vahani Karnena Vela Kula Ashvatthama Vikarna Gora Makara Duryodhana Vartini Sotirna Kalupandavairanadi Kaivatakaf Keshava Parasharya Vachasarojamamalam Gitartagandotkatam Nanahyanaka Kesaram Harikata Sambodhana Bodhitam Loke Sajjana Shattvadairaharaha Tepiyamanam Muda Bhuyad Bharata Pankajam Parimala Sinashayase Mukham Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Sunvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sanghapadakramaupanishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Yanavastita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yoginaha Yasyantam Navidussurasuraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha
तृतीयोऽध्यायः सञ्जय उवाच तं तथा कृपयाविष्टम् अश्रुपूर्णाकुलेक्षणम् विषीदन्तमिदं वाक्यम् उवाच मधुसूदनः श्रीभगवानुवाच कुतस्त्वाकश्मलमिदं विषमे समुपस्थितम् अनार्यदृष्टमस्वर्ग्यम् अकीर्तिकरमर्जुन क्लैर्यमास्मगमः पार्थः
दौर्बल्यं चोत्तिष्ठ परं तप
अर्जुन उवाच कथं भीष्ममहं
संख्ये द्रोणं च मधुसूदनः ईशुभिः प्रतियोत्स्यामि पूजार्हावरिसूदन गुरुन् हत्वा हि महानुभावान् श्रेयो भोक्तुं भैक्ष्यमपीह लोके हत्वार्थकामांस्तु गुरूनिहैव भुञ्जीय भोगान् रुधिरप्रदिग्धान् न चैतद्विद्मः कतरन्नो गरीयः यद्वा जयेम यदि वा नो जयेयुः तानेव हत्वा न जिजीविषामः तेव स्थिताः प्रामुखे द्वार्धराष्ट्राः. Enough, now we'll do it. यावानर्थ उदपानि 45-46 that one. यावानर्थ उदपानि सर्वतः सम्प्लुतोदके तावान् सर्वेषु वेदेषु ब्राह्मणस्य विजानतः कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भूः मा ते सङ्गोस्त्वकर्मणि. Then next one. योगस्थः कुरु कर्माणि सङ्गं त्यक्त्वा धनञ्जय सिद्ध्यसिद्ध्यो समो भूत्वा समत्वं योग उच्यते. ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Last time we saw that there are two ways in which this sounds like a simple verse and people quote it very simply also. Karmani eva adhikarah te. It is very complicated bhashya wise, and even how it is intended to be because of the context in which it occurs. Because the context is really everything. And we saw that it is occurring in the context of the advice, the adhikara, the topic, or the advice given, which is nistraigunyo bhava, be beyond the three gunas, correct? And how to be beyond the three gunas? Catch hold of sattva. Why should I catch hold of sattva? Because that is the way to let go of the other gunas. And then what happens as a result? You become like the person, who is like the water, fills up everything. So you don't have to go to a particular body of water. And there too is the symbolism. The two bodies of water, one which is all pervasive and the one which is small pervasive. The small pervasive is all the little means and ends as symbolized by the first portion of the Veda, and the all pervasive water here is Vedanta, represents Vedanta, and that Vedanta includes this also. We saw that in detail yesterday. So coming from there, we have to see this particular mantra in that same trajectory, because the adhikara is all about, what is your purpose in this life, in this place, how are you supposed to go from here to the whole vision that was given, that the Atma is without any second. It is what it is indestructible, it is not, so it cannot be destroyed even when the body is destroyed. It is just like changing clothes, the various bodies, all this. So how to go from this place, and what is this place? This place is exactly the place where Arjuna is standing, i.e. the battlefield. Here there is something looming to be done. The battle has to be done and he doesn't want the battle. So that also is part of that ongoing context of the Shiksha, the teaching here. And so this first line, Karmani eva adhikarahate, can be understood in two ways. The first way is to see, actually three ways, but first way we said that last time, but I'm going to repeat it. So the first way is to see Karmani eva adhikarahate. Adhikara is used in the correct way. Adhikara means you have a say over karma. Te means for you. Who is being addressed? Arjuna. So for you, Arjuna, there is no adhikara for sannyasa. Meaning it is too soon for you right now. It's not the appropriate time right now to be going to Rishikesh. What's in Rishikesh? Lot of orange. And so this is not the time. Half the people are dressed in orange, really. You go to a pharmacy, the sannyasi is manning the pharmacy. It was such a shock for me, And he haggled also. He was charging me extra. I pointed out, he says, no, you have to give. We are sannyasis, namaha, So this is the whole thing. So we have to, see this thing that Krishna is trying to make Arjuna see what his purpose is in his life right now, right here. Because Krishna knows that Arjuna had a time, in fact he had 12 long years and one more year in incognito vasa, incognito living, to get sick of the battle. To say, what are we preparing for? Why are we in this forest? Why do we have this life of exile? And I'm sure when he was in the forest, he encountered a lot of Mahatmas, people who knew, people who were probably waiting to be asked to be taught, to teach, but he didn't approach anybody. He was bloodthirsty at that time, Draupadi was bloodthirsty, literally. She says, until I anoint my hair with Dushasana's blood, I'm not going to make my hair. She grew dreadlocks. That's what she did for 12 years. Yeah. So therefore, this is, they were all just chafing at the bit to fight. And suddenly seeing the war face to face, not even the war, he's fought plenty of wars. The me and the mine, my people. Seeing that face to face, he could not come to terms with it. And now he wants a about face, correct? And so therefore, for this reason, for the reason that you are running away from what you are supposed to do. Sannyasi does not run away from anything. That is the whole idea. There is nothing to run. Where are you going to run? Run away from what? Brahman. Run away to what? Brahman. Who is the runner? Brahman. Who is the avoider? Brahman. Who is the approacher? Brahman. That's what it is. So the person who is ready to be a sannyasi is in total acceptance of everything as it is all the time. That is a far cry from what, this one is, Arjuna is. Therefore he is told, Karmani eva adhikarahate. And it's just a fact. You are not ready for sannyasa, and also right now you are not a sannyasi. So I'm going to talk to you like you are not a sannyasi, so you don't have adhikara for sannyasa. So therefore, if you don't have adhikara for sannyasa, what are you supposed to do? Karma. That's what you're supposed to do. You can't say, I don't like it. I'm not going to do it. Because that's what you're supposed to do. That's how it is. So in that sense, karmani eva adhikarahate. For you, Arjuna, O Arjuna, you have right only over karma. And since you think it is distasteful, this particular one, I'm going to give you a little trick. Ma phaleshu kadachana. Don't worry about the results. You do what you're supposed to do. Leave the results to where they are supposed to come from. Ma karma phala hetur bhuhu means don't be the cause of the result of action, because that is Bhagavan's portfolio. You are taking that away from him. Ma te sangaha astu akarmani. And also don't be a lazy fellow. Akarmani with reference to inertia, no karma. Akarma means no karma. Akarmani, seventh case, with reference to inertia. What? Mate, may there not be sangaha astu. May you not fall in love with inertia. Because what is to be done is distasteful. This is the default value. When you wake up, this happens to everybody. If you wake up and you realize that today is this day full of boring meetings, full of boring paperwork, full of boring people, then you immediately feel like taking a sick day. Correct? Yeah. Or you go there and you're on passive strike. You just can't find the papers. You forgot the room where the meeting is supposed to take place. And like this it keeps continuing. Because the inner children, the Ragadveshas, are on strike. Right? Yeah, so they don't want to do anything. So they are on strike. And this is what is called akarmani sangaha, the delight or the attachment to non-doing. Oh, but I thought non-doing is a good thing. Yes, when you are ready to do non-doing, quote unquote, when you are ready for non-doing, then that is the only option. Because you have discovered yourself as the non-doer, you have absorbed doership from you, the definition of you, then you are ready to not do. But right now, if the cart is put before the horse and you are ready to not do, what will happen? You will do what you are not supposed to do. That's what will happen. That's why there is only 1 or 2 days off at the end of the week. If all the days, the desire is, why can't we have 5 holidays and 2 working days? Not good for the economy, one thing. But then, why can't we just have 5 holidays, 2 working days, bas, enough. Monday you will be happy. Okay, holiday, Saturday, Sunday I worked. Tuesday, holiday, wonderful. By Wednesday you are sick, bored, tired, angry. And by Thursday you want to get into trouble. You sit and court trouble, Because this is the human mind, this is the tendency. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, you will do what you're not supposed to do. So better have a routine, better have a ritual, a series of rituals that make the day, that keep you in a safe zone of doing. Otherwise, if the inertia takes over, really the human body, mind, sense complex is very clever. It will get away with doing as little as possible, And if you let that inertia take over, then there is no coming back. Becomes very, very difficult. So that is what is being told in the first meaning. This we discussed last time, so I'm not going to, talk about it too much. Then there are two other meanings. One is to look at the word, and this is what Bhashyakara takes, to look at the word adhikara in the sense of longing. Adhikara doesn't mean longing by any stretch of the imagination. But paramparaya, because Bhashyakara Adi Shankara is the interpreter of the lineage has seen it this way, because he sees it this way. And how is that? Karmani eva trishna te. Trishna means longing. So you have longing only for karma. You know? Karmani eva adhikarahate. You have karma, longing for karma. And then what? This adhikara doesn't mean you have longing for karma. It's more of an injunction. Nobody has longing for karma. It's an injunction to transfer the longing for karma phala onto the karma. Very interesting. So he's not saying that if adhikara means longing, karmani eva adhikarahate, you have longing only for karma. That means what? That means you replace the word karma with karma phala. That's what it is. Because nobody does karma for the sake of karma. Nobody cooks for the sake of cooking. Cooking is for eating. Yeah, simple. You can't wait for it to be done because you want to eat it. And then after that you wash the dishes. Why? Because you have to eat again next day. So it's all for bhoga. Bhoga, ya karma. Because if you didn't have to eat the next day, nobody would wash dishes. You leave it alone. What is there? Let all the roaches and the spiders come and eat, and bhuta yajna we can call it, like giving to the lesser fortunate. And but nobody does that, because everything has to be put away in its place. Everything has to be clean, neat and tidy. Why? Because tomorrow I can chop the vegetables again. Tomorrow I need the pots and pans again. Tomorrow I need the dishes again. So it's all for the sake of eating. So much production, my God. And the eating means what? It's only 3 inches, the tongue. Yeah. Eating is not a big deal. May as well be on a tube, You can put a tube in the navel, and it is called, what is that? Feeding tube. And this feeding tube will deliver all the essential nutrients. You make a little vitamin and protein cocktail, and you shake it up, you make a protein shake, and press it and put it in the navel. Finished. Why do you have to, why bother? But that's just because this fellow, this tongue, jihva, although 3 inches long, very powerful. It's the only organ which is the organ of action and a sense organ doubled. That's why more dangerous. Yeah. And this little fellow, you don't even know where he is. It's in the mouth somewhere. Only after you have said things you don't mean, you say, oh, okay, that tongue. Doesn't even come out to say hi. And sitting, all the culinary contests, all the restaurants are for this 3-inch fellow. Because once it has gone past, who cares? Once it's in the gullet, it doesn't matter whether it is spicy, whether it has a Chinese flair or some kind of California cuisine, or whether it is, what is that called? New Asian or a fusion, African, Ethiopian. Who cares? It doesn't matter. This is just a waste for the food pipe. Even though it's called food pipe, it's not a connoisseur of the food. Yeah, all these things for this little 3-inch fellow who sits and who is the master of the culinary ragadveshas. And so when you're shopping for some pots and pans, you don't think you're buying it for your tongue, but actually that's what you're doing. You're going shopping for the tongue. Yeah. All pots and pans with certain things and all this, cast iron, this iron, that iron, certain and various methods of cooking. This tandoori, this clay pot, and underneath you put these embers, live embers, and on top of that you roll out and then cook it. There's a certain way of cooking it. Or otherwise you put it inside itself, and what you put on the outside is called handkerchief roti. It's as thin as a handkerchief. Yeah, it's so confusing. It looks just like a handkerchief. You may just stuff it in your pocket and walk out. Only when you have to blow your nose, then you say, oh no, this is a roti, this is what the thing is. And all these textures, these various designs, everything is for this little tongue. Pots, pans, rolling, pins, everything. And, so here, this is what we have to understand here. So this longing is not, even though it is centered on the tongue, think of how much this longing, how much karma it commandeers. How much karma it commands. Think of the ways of chopping vegetables. Just cutting, julienne, I don't know what that means, but some, diagonal, something will be there. Cubing, dicing, all kinds of things, slicing, and different kinds for chips, finger chips, thin chips, all kinds of things. All this is all this karma is for this fellow who is sitting there. This is huge. And so here, karmani eva adhikarahate means you have a longing for karma phala. That's why your longing is just, misplaced onto karma as well. So karmani eva adhikarahate, and then he says ma phaleshu kadachana, means you may have the longing for the karma phala, but really speaking it won't go your way. It's not going to go your way. And therefore the warning, ma karma phala hetur bhuhu, do not become the cause of the fruits of karma. Don't try to control the results of actions, because that means you will take another big dip into samsara. Chocolate dipped strawberries, like that. So, samsara dipped jiva. Yes, everyone has a coating. All jivas have a coating because they have been hand dipped by their own ragadveshas into this vat of samsara and put out to dry. This is what the whole thing is. So that is the second meaning. So adhikara here means longing, and that longing is going to be your debacle. Because of this longing, you are going to make mistakes. And because of this longing, what are you going to do? You are going to make all kinds of wrong actions in order to get what you want. And those wrong actions are going to create situations, and he's going to say this in the Bhashya later. What is he going to say? He's going to create situations where you are going to be embroiled in a series of actions and reactions, which will lead to rebirth. That is what samsara is. It will lead to being born again. But I want to be born again. Okay, then we don't need to talk to you at all. Yeah. No need to say anything. If you want to be born again, we say welcome, welcome back. Many happy returns, Not just one return. Many happy returns, plural. Welcome back, no problem. But then you have to go through the same thing all over again. Caesarean birth, or stuck in the, canal the wrong way, the legs coming out first, breech birth, and, or fighting it out with other, beings inside. What is that? Triplet, quadruplet birth. Chances of survival 0 really, but somehow they all survive. And sometimes they don't. All that is there. Siamese birth, stuck, for life to another being. And so these kinds of birth itself is fraught with so many problems. Congenital birth defect, hole in the heart, and then hole in the head, so many things. There was one baby that was born. I met it. No brains at all.
What?
No brains it had, literally. But still somehow for almost 1 year it survived. Somewhere in Colorado when I went, I held it, I met it. Passed away afterwards, I was told. But no brains, but still all the functions were somehow continuing. This is what is fantastic. Anencephaly, it is called encephaly. An means not, negative particle. Yeah. So, no brain at all. The head is empty, literally. But still it was sleeping, waking, digesting somehow, whatever little it could. Most of the time it would come out, but little bit it would. That's how it, passed away, because it was not able to get nutrition. Little bit it would do. Of course, it had no understanding whether you were holding it or whether it was on the, cot or anything. This is what it is. So birth itself is fraught with so many problems, so many defects. And then, what to talk of growing up. All the pangs, all the difficulties, and then grow, all the neglect from the caregivers, all the fears, the tears, the sorrows, all the unfulfilled train of desires in this life, in the past life, everybody comes along, Then all this to manage, somehow grow up, only to get married, and and then have a war zone right there, because all the expectations and fears come out even more. And then somehow to manage all the marriages, somehow to manage all the jobs and the children and all these things. And then what? And then by that time one is 40. 40 means what? The diseases start to come, all kinds of diseases. In fact, if you ask anybody who is plus 40 plus, here 40 is nothing for people. 40 means they are just being born. They have just been weaned off the pacifier, they think. They think they are young. In India, if you talk to anybody 40 plus, they will say, oh, one leg is already in the grave. Yeah. It's not a pessimistic statement. It's a statement of fact, of accepting that the body is over the hill. Of course, in developed world, 50 is over the hill. 60 is over the, in fact now the 60 is the new 50. Yeah. And then 70 is the new 60. In another 10 years it will be even further, because all the medical knowledge is keeping on coming and nobody wants to die and everybody wants to just be all the time there. And then they will also say, I'm a young 70. In describing themselves, people will say that. I'm not an old 70, I'm a young 70. You are 70, no? Yeah, okay, then keep quiet. So, like this, all this whole trajectory. And then, of course, whether you are a young 70 or an old 70, that's not what the body is going to think. The body is going to say, time to fall apart. And it's going to manifest all the things that were working will not work. Chronic things which were already there will flare up. Everything that you used to take, you will become allergic, and that will never give you relief anymore. This is a fact of life. And then because of that, new syndromes will start to come. And then one day the body says, I'm done. You go on forward, leave me behind. I'm done, I don't want to go any further. And so then the next body comes. So after learning about all this, especially learning Kathopanishad, the last verse we studied, Yoni manye prapadyante sharirattvaya dehinah sthanu manye anusanyanti yatha karma yatha shrutam. We saw that. And how the urgency to take on bodies and urgency to celebrate birthdays is very much there for this jiva. Yeah. Wants to keep on having new births. And Bhagavan wants Ma karma phala hetur bhuhu. Yeah, samsare patishyati. You will just fall in samsara repeatedly. You keep falling into samsara. And then what? And then there is no redemption for you, because then when you fall into samsara, more action, more reaction, more adharma, more this, more that. All this is just this jumbled up problems are there. So that's the second meaning. Adhikara here means longing, present continuous, intended, keep on longing. Yeah, so, and then the third meaning is that which we know very well. That's why I saved it for the last. Adhikara means your domain. And that's something which is an established meaning in Sanskrit also. In the Panini Sutras they say Adhikara Sutra, a sutra that has a certain domain that's going to govern all the sutras under it. Dhatoho Adhikara 311. Pratyayaha, Parascha, those are all smaller adhikaras within Dhatoho. But the Dhatoho goes from 311 to 397. The whole, Asamapta Tritiya Adhyaye. Till the third chapter ends, it will go. So that means that Dhatu means that is the Adhikara for all the sutras that are going to come. So Adhikara means your reign, your domain. So what is your domain? Karmani eva. And here te doesn't mean you. Te means all the jivas who are reading this. Now we have gone from the specific to the general in this particular reading. So this is the third reading. And this is something which we know, which is very famous, and this meaning is well entrenched in all the Gita circles. They may not know much about the Gita, but this verse they will know, and this is how they interpret it, and it's not wrong also. So the third, it lends to this interpretation as well. And what is the interpretation? Adhikara means your domain. Your domain is only in action. Ma phaleshu, not in the results thereof. At any time you don't have any hope of controlling the results of your action. And if you try to control the results of your action, what are you becoming? Karma phala hetu. Hetu means the cause of the fruits of action. And that is going to get you into trouble. Why? Because it's a process that is fraught with failure. If something is out of reach and you keep trying to reach it, you will fail. Better know that it's out of reach and don't go there. That's not in your dominion. Your domain is action, not the results thereof. Therefore, don't go trying to control the fruits of action. And on the flip side, don't get so despondent because of the fact that you're not controlling the results of action and go sit down under the covers. Mate sangaha astu. Sangaha means in attachment to what? Akarmani, to despair here. Akarmani here means despondency, despair, and despair arising out of not being able to monitor and control the fruits of your action. And that despair taking the form of apathy towards action itself in general. Very interesting. So this is the world famous, meaning. This is something that is accepted and talked about a lot. So therefore, karmani eva adhikarahate here means you have a say over the karma. But you can't control the result. Supposing if somebody wanted to jump, sometimes they go, in these movies we see, James Bond style movies. What is that? They are running on the roofs of the houses. Why can't they run on the road? Because that has been done in another movie. This one they want to have something else, something slightly different. So here they are running on the roof. The goodies and the baddies. Baddies are chasing the goodies. Goodies are having some goodie which they have to give to some big governmental organization which they have snatched from the baddies, and they are running. Maybe it's a piece of software, maybe it is something important, maybe it's the know-how to make a bomb that will just blow up the all the multiverses, and maybe that's what it is. So it is something small that they are carrying and running away. They have snatched it from the hands of the baddies. And where are they running? On the rooftops. So when they come to the edge of the one roof, they have to gauge what is the distance. Correct? and then they have to estimate that and somehow transfer it to their legs. And then they have to jump, correct? So once you jump, supposing you're short, what does it matter? You're going to go plonk anyway, correct? Yeah. So all the guesswork is before you jump, correct? All the guesstimation, the estimation, everything. So let's say out of the people who are running, one of them running and jumping, one of them was a lay person. He just used his head and, used it wrongly, and then and he thought it was 5 feet, but actually it was 6. He eyeballed it. So he planned to jump for 5 feet, but actually it was short, correct? So by 1 foot he was short, and dhadam, he went down. And then as he jumped, he didn't know it was short. Only when he didn't make it and he was trying to make it, he said, oh, didn't make it. The other one, let's say, was a physicist. Okay? And what did that fellow do? He measured and estimated and square footed and, all these things. Everything he also, what's that? Tried to control a few of the hidden variables, like the wind blowing, because is there a headwind? Or like the plane, is there a tailwind? So how much effort, what is the velocity of this body in space? All these things, he was very brilliant, and he made some calculations. He was also wrong. Who? The physicist. Okay? He also jumped, and he was also falling, correct? Or what was the difference between that, the lay fellow's fall and this fellow's fall? What's the difference? No difference at all. Only difference, if there is one, is that the first fellow falling did not know, all the velocity and all these things. This fellow falling was also measuring his velocity as a body and the distance to go down and how much it will hurt when he lands. That's what he was doing. So basically, neither of them could control the result of the action. So the knowledge here, knowledge doesn't mean Atma Vidya, okay? Knowledge doesn't mean that Vedanta. We are talking of what kind of knowledge? The knowledge behind the action, is not going to help you to control the results. Moral of the story, correct? So the moral of the story is that no matter how, even if you know everything about physics, if you make a mistake, it's the same mistake as made on part of someone who doesn't know how to even, spell physics. That person may be thinking it starts with a phys, F-I-Z-Z, physics. He doesn't even know the ABC of physics. And the other one, what does the other one know? The other one knows everything, still manages to fall. Only, saving grace is that he knew already, how many days he would have to spend in the hospital. That's all he knew. That's all. But what does it matter whether whether you know you are going to spend a week in the hospital or whether you don't know you are going to spend a week? You spend a week, you have to, correct? Yeah. So this is what the science. This is a science. This is what the science is. That this is a fact. This is not something you can object or agree or disagree with. Even if you agree with me that you have no control over the results of action, it's not going to flatter. If you say, I disapprove of what you're saying and I disagree, that also is not going to make a difference, because this is not anybody's personal opinion. This is a law. The law of karma is that as long as you haven't acted, there is a freedom. Once you have acted, you have lost that freedom to control the outcome. Perhaps you can try again with regard to the next action, but with that action which has already taken place, it is gone, it's no longer in your hands. In fact, it never was. So this is something which seems very obvious sitting in the class. But upon going home, it gets mystified again. Kimartham? Why? Because there is some block to seeing this, to understanding this. And that block is there because of ragadveshas. Blockade, rather. There is a big blockade to understanding this because of ragadveshas, even though it's a fact. Because other than the 1 hour spent here in class, the rest of the waking hours, let's say out of 24 hours, let's say, you have a good sleep for 12 hours. And then out of the 12 hours, 1 hour gone, 11 hours. 1 hour in Gita class. So out of all the 11 hours, most of that time is spent trying to control and have a say over the results of action. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita does not have a definition of failure. Very interesting. It only has a definition of success. Siddhi. Siddhi means success. Doesn't have a definition of failure. No one is a loser according to its standards. But you can inhibit this siddhi. Perhaps that's the definition of someone who is a loser. And for that we have to look at the definition of siddhi, success. Success is not defined by gaining what you want in the Bhagavad Gita. Success is defined by the extent to which you are able to have a say over what you want. Success is defined by how you accept what comes, with what grace, with what integrity. You are able to accept what comes rather than always mount a battalion of karma in its defense because you did not like the outcome. Success comes to those who are able to deal with the outcome of the karma in their lives with grace and flexibility. That is the definition of success. So by interpolation, we have to bring out the definition of failure. Who is a failure? The one who is unable to deal with the outcome of their actions or other people's actions around them. That is the failure. The one who is always a control freak and trying to control the results of their actions and facing defeat at all times. That is the failure. This is very interesting because the Gita is silent on who is a failure, but defines success very, very clearly. So then, seen as a law of karma, law means what? It is infallible. It is inescapable. You can't escape this law, correct? Yeah. So, what do? You can only have a way to make peace with it. What do? That's what you do. You have a way to make peace with it. And starting with this verse, the whole Bhagavad Gita gives a definition of a lifestyle, defines a lifestyle to overcome this particular, not to overcome the law, to overcome my disappointment with regard to this law. And what is the disappointment with regard to this law? Not getting what I want. How to overpower this disappointment is really one half of the purpose of the Gita. That is, comes under the rubric of what is termed as Yoga Shastra. Shastra teaching yoga. Yoga here doesn't mean what? Asana. Yoga doesn't mean asana. Very interesting, because we have three words that end up in a particular masculine formation of a noun called yoga. Yuj, yuj has all two meanings. One is in the sense of joining, the another is in the sense of restraint, and the third, yujir, the third one, is in the sense of a discipline. All three are very apt here. And it will be wonderful to see be a nice PhD in Bhagavad Gita to see how each one is there. But here the joining is what is talked about. The joining in the sense of a lifestyle. A committed lifestyle is what is called yoga. Nishtha, a committed lifestyle. A committed lifestyle to save one's sanity from being committed. This is what the whole thing is. So this committed lifestyle, is expounded starting with this verse. And it's wrong to say that only 3-4 verses, this one they will quote, and then another one, and then they will say this is all Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is there throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Like so many gems, hidden. In a velvet pouch you have so many diamonds. Like that, the instructions on this particular studied, well practiced, well entrenched, experienced by others, a foolproof lifestyle to shield oneself from the disappointment of not getting what one wants is given throughout the yoga, that is throughout the Gita, and that is what is called Yoga Shastra. So that accounts for about half of the Bhagavad Gita. What about the other half? How to become rich and famous, how to make friends and influence people. What's the other half? Huh? Atma Jnana, Brahma Vidya. One half is Brahma Vidya, the other half is what is called Yoga Shastra. That's why at the end we repeat Om Tat Sat. Class is not ending, okay? Yeah. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Su what? Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. And how is this delivered? Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade, delivered through the conversations, a special conversation shared by the teacher and the student. Who is the teacher? Krishna and the student Arjuna. So this is what is the whole thing. So since it covers half of the teaching, therefore it is of prime importance. It's a foolproof way to fool the ragadveshas and to have mastery over them. This is what is of the greatest importance. How to have mastery over the raga and the dvesha. Because the raga dvesha are the ones that are making me lose sight of this law and go against this law. What is this law? Yeah, that you are not in charge of the results. That is the law. So what makes me try to transgress the law? Yeah. It's like putting the hand in the fire. And then you cannot blame the fire for burning the finger. You cannot say, you burnt me. No, I didn't burn you. No, but you look, all scars and big, boils, blisters. You burnt me. Why did you put your hand in me? My nature is hot and light giving. My nature is to burn. Burn is not an action. Burn is my nature. If you come anywhere near me, that's what you're going to happen. That's what's going to happen. Same thing here. You have a say over your action. Keep doing. But then what? you don't have a say over what will come. What will come, you don't know. So therefore, you see, one doesn't really have a say over one's raga dveshas either. Do you know what's going to be your next raga and dvesha? Huh? Huh? Any guesses? No. You don't know. Sometimes you don't want to know. You don't know what your next raga dvesha is. So, really speaking, one doesn't even have a say over raga dveshas. Because if I go that route, then also it's a pipe dream. Because what am I saying? I want to have a say over raga dveshas, I want to have a say, I don't want to have ragas, that becomes a raga. You know? I don't want to have dveshas, I hate dveshas, that has become a dvesha. So you can't go that route either. It's not going to help. And you can't dissociate and say, I am in my happy place, there is no raga, what dvesha, nothing is there. That is called dissociation. You can't pretend that they are not there. Pretending that they are not there is not going to make them go away. Correct? So then, in fact, you can't touch them at all because they are just like a live wire. If you touch one, you get a big shock. Oh my God! This is the extent of this raga, I didn't know. That's why one is afraid to go into the raga dveshas because it's like a live wire. It shocks you. And so, you don't have a say over the raga dveshas. And you don't have the say over what? The results of action. So what do you have a say over, really? Action alone. And this verse, the te, karmani eva adhikaraha te, tubhyam, unto you, is directed towards human beings. Because human beings have free will, supposedly, which makes them have freedom of action. The donkey doesn't have freedom of action. It can only bray, it cannot pray. Correct? Yeah. It cannot pray. It can kick. Just felt like kicking. Kicked. It thought, it's a long time since I had a good kick. I'm just getting that feeling of having a nice good kick. A sadhu, a person in orange, was walking behind. Got kicked. You know? So, did it get the karma of kicking the sadhu? No. In fact, the sadhu should be told, you are a murkha. You are a fool. Why are you walking behind the donkey? Don't walk behind the donkey. Moral of the story. Because you don't know when it will feel like having a really good kick. That's its nature. It just feels like doing something and it's totally absolved from papa punya. This is what we have to understand. Papa punya is the merits and merits of the action it doesn't incur. And those merits and demerits don't transfer into new actions and new results of action. It's totally free. Dog, it makes no difference. Makes no difference at all. They do all kinds of things. For the dog, it makes no difference. They will buy matching mattress and bed sheet for the dog. Okay? Size of the dog, small, medium, large, extra large, all these things will be there. Dog doesn't know it is matching. This one also has paw prints, that one also has paw prints, and this one has a pillow in the shape of a bone. All this it doesn't it doesn't know. And if you take it shopping, dogs or us, if you take it to what was that toy? Dogs or what? Why did I say dogs or us?
Like there's Toys R Us.
Toys R Us. Yeah. Okay, that's why I said that. Okay, there is no dogs or us. Anyhow, so but it may well be there. But so yeah, if you go to a pet shop, it's not going to pick out, I want this bowl, I want maybe bone because of the smell, but other than that, it's not going to say, I want this bed sheet, mama, I want that one. It's not going to say all those things. It's for your aesthetic pleasure, so that it matches, that bone-shaped pillow matches with the rest of your house decor. That's all you're trying to do. That's what you're doing. You're going dog shopping for yourself. It's not for the dog, doesn't have all that. Could care less. And if the dog performs an action, if it bites, it just feels like biting someone, and it just looks at a pair of legs. This is exactly the kind of leg I want today, and goes and chomps down. It's not going to get Papa or the meritorious effects. It's not going to get. Why? Because the free will to understand what it's doing or not doing is not there. This is the robber, I should bite his leg. This is the policeman, it's the hand that has been feeding me in the K9 unit. I should not bite this policeman. That Viveka is not there. Little bit is there, but not beyond that. That discrimination is not there. So they are absolved of Papa Punya. Dog cannot have Papa Punya. Cat cannot have, a cat even less. Papa Punya. Cat has no guilt feeling at all, no matter what it does. The guilt is entirely absent. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, today is Ekadashi, I haven't done Upavasa. It doesn't, I have to fast today. It doesn't think like that at all. It has no guilt, nothing. Today I think I'll eat only fish. It doesn't think like that at all. It just leads its life, survival of the fittest. It claws, it hisses, it scratches, whatever it needs to do, by whatever means necessary, it makes do, it protects its young. And when the young grow up and become a, competition in the whole thing for the same food, it will not stop at hissing at its very young and refusing to recognize them. It leads a glorious life. All of them have a glorious life. It's only the human being that has the full freedom in terms of action, in terms of how much that self-consciousness is developed. I am aware of everything and I am aware of myself. It's fully developed. And the free will is uninhibited, is totally free. It's not inhibited by being programmed to be a certain way. The dog is supposed to do something and the cat has a certain... That's why you can predict their behavior. Even the unpredictable behavior you can still predict. Dog bites man, not a big newspaper item, because that's what it's supposed to do. Man bites dog, yes, it will definitely come in the newspaper. This is what I'm trying to say. There is freedom over action. The actions are not programmed. But you know what? For the human beings, they may well be programmed the way we are living really. Because what are they programmed by? Ragadveshas. Yeah. Unfortunately. So the Bhagavad Gita, this Karma Yoga, is retrieval of the Ragadveshas. Retrieval of the free will from the hands of the Ragadveshas. So that the free will is repatriated to me and it's not being operated by people. People, no. They may as well be Ragadveshas, who are always in a state of urgency, who are always coming from the base level animalistic desires and fears, competition, jealousy, territoriality. All these are the instincts that even drive people. What to talk of animals? That they drive animals is not an issue. But they drive the people to do the most heinous of crimes. So, this is why the study of the Bhagavad Gita, I said, imparts sanity. Without a committed lifestyle, one is fit to be committed. This is what the whole thing is. This is the sanity that one wants. And one has to have, because as a result of this sanity, what happens? That the Ragadveshas are in my say. I operate them, I manage them, they don't manage me. And my friends, it's not a one day endeavor. Today I am a karma yogi, tomorrow bhogi, day after tomorrow ragi, dveshi, bhogi. Never a yogi. No. No. This is, karma yoga is enjoyed in layers and increments, watching oneself be less and less reactive, more and more present, freer and freer in terms of the free will. Now one might have a pertinent question. Why is it so important to free the free will? What does it mean to free the free will? Because the free will is kept hostage, is in the prison. The bars are of raga and dvesha, alternatively. And the free will says, let me out. Raga dvesha says, no, not until you do our bidding. Agree to rob the bank, then we'll let you out. Okay, I'll rob the bank. Then they let it out for an airing. Then after the bank is robbed, then what? The free will is really in jail. The raga dveshas also come along. And the free will and raga dveshas have a fight. See what you made me do, Now I'm in jail. Before also you were in our jail. What's the big difference? That's all it is. So therefore, this is a very, very subtle and profound teaching here. And without this teaching, the moksha teaching is of no use. Doesn't work. That's what the whole thing is. This is a preparation for moksha. Because I set my life in order, and then moksha is myself alone. I see that. That knowledge comes on its own practically. Being exposed to the teaching, it will have fruit, it will bear fruit. Otherwise, years of Vedanta without yoga, ayukta means without this yoga, samsiddhi na vindate, does not get success in terms of moksha, in terms of this freedom. So if I am born in ignorance, that means what happens? The broods of this ignorance, self-ignorance, namely the raga and the dvesha, have already colonized the mind, body, senses. They have proliferated. And they have, I am this hostage, this ayyo pavam hostage, sitting there helpless. And so therefore the free will is never free. Never free. Never free at all. Every action is just, perhaps when you come to study Vedanta, it is free, a little bit. And when you pray, it is free because you don't have to do that. And then if you are doing some reaching out actions, like Purta Karma, giving charity, donations, you don't have to do that. In fact, the Raga Dveshas don't want you to do that. Then it is free a little bit. But otherwise, it is come under the spell of the Raga Dveshas. Indriyasya arthe ragadveshau vyavasthitau. Elsewhere it is said this is all part of the Karma Yoga discussion. So in addressing this verse, I will be borrowing verses from various chapters. Indriyasya arthe ragadveshau vyavasthitau. In every jiva, ragadveshas proliferate. Oh, that's good. It's not just me. No, it's not just you. Oh, goody. That means Bhagavan Krishna allows ragadveshas to proliferate. Read the fine print, which is the next line. What is that? Tayoho vasham na agachet tau hi asya paripanthinau asya purushasya asya sadhakasya asya mumukshoho. For this freedom seeker, these are the enemies. Don't come under their spell. Easier said than done. How to not come under their spell? How should I not come under their spell? That means I cannot deal with them because I don't know which corners they are lurking and what forms they take, and like viruses they morph into one thing and another thing, third thing, fourth thing, and sometimes whatever you desire is not what you want. How to do this? Therefore, go to the only place where I have a say. What is that? Action. And do whatever it is I am supposed to do. Do what I am supposed to do. But how do I know what I am supposed to do? it depends on desha, kala. If it is night, sleep. Okay, that's what you're supposed to. No, last life I was an owl. And that samskara prevails. And that's why I've started coming to Vedanta class, so I can catch some sleep. So, this is all part of this ragadvesha management through putting them on a regimen. You put the ragadveshas on a diet. Yeah. That's what it is. Don't feed them too many carbohydrates of the sense objects. You put them on the diet, but indirectly, because if you starve them, they're going to come back with a vengeance. So indirectly you put them on a diet by doing what you're supposed to do. So you are so busy that you don't even know how to give them the time of day. And this is Pujya Swamiji's formula. You go in any ashram, nobody is sitting under a tree. Okay? Yeah. And you go there and you wonder, how do the people do all the things that they are doing? How is it manageable physically? And then some people might even think, oh, this must be just cruelty. How is this possible? It is not cruelty. Because like I said, the ragadveshas are so clever. They are into various avatars. And you know what they do? If you do less, they'll want you to do even less so that they have more time to go on their little spin-off and take you elsewhere. But if you have a routine from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, they are flummoxed, they are tired, the body is tired. Since they ride on the energy of the body, mind, sense complex, they also get tired of waiting and go to sleep. And a ragadvesha scorned is a ragadvesha won over. You can't directly scorn it. You just say later, later, later. And in fact, borrowing from the Gita alone without knowing, the latest advances in child rearing talk about deferred gratification. Nowadays they are saying, just because the child jumps up and down and says, I want to have this now, it's actually bad parenting practice. To just say, okay, let's just go and get it right now, even if it's the middle of the night, just because you want it. So the parents are told to strengthen from being puppets to the demands of the children. You have to strengthen your own psyche as a parent and delay the gratification. Little later. If they ask for it right now, say tomorrow. If they ask for it tomorrow, say, in a few days. If they ask for it, I want this, next week, in a few months. Oh, I want this for Christmas, let's see next year, let's be alive. So like this you delay gratification, not because the mother and the father are some kind of, what is it called, sadists. No, this is not a sadistic practice. It's a strategic practice to not allow the ragadvesha in the child to proliferate so much that it is then becomes a useless adult. That is what they say. If you want the child to be a well-adjusted adult, you be in charge of delaying its gratification. Oh, but I feel guilty, that's something for you to work on. That's what you have to do. So, the same thing operates on your own, the inner children, the ragadveshas. I want it now. Well, yes, you can have it, but right now I'm really busy. It is time for evening puja. But who cares about evening puja? Well, I do. But I don't want you to care. Well, that's part of the job. See, it is written down. Oh, okay. This is time for rest. This is time to eat. Oh, but let's just, forget everything and eat late and stay up late and do other things. No, this is time to eat right now. Come what may, this is what I follow in my life. You see, it's very interesting. All this is to gain freedom. And to gain this freedom, there is a loss of freedom, apparent loss of freedom of the ragadveshas, where the Americans freak out right here, right about now. Not in India. This freaking doesn't happen in India. because we are born freaky, you know. The Indian mother, especially the ancient, not even ancient, even 2 generations ago, the Indian mother never asked the child, even 1 generation ago, what will you have on your toast? What will you have for breakfast? Cereal or pancakes? You know, now they have understood that in child's speaking, when they start to speak, you know, 18 months, 2 years, when they start to speak, apparently they only know how to say the last thing you repeated. So you try saying, will you have cereal or toast? The child will say toast. A minute later you say, will you have toast or cereal? The child will say cereal. What does it mean? It's not really choosing. It's just repeating. It's trying out its language skills. It doesn't have the wherewithal to choose. And the more you make it choose, you're forcing it to give up its childhood. Really. So nobody asked us. You know, when I grew up, nobody said, you know, what are you going to have for breakfast? Breakfast was, even in this country, 2-3 generations ago, nobody, you know, breakfast was what was for breakfast. And if you didn't like it, you would definitely want lunch. If you didn't like that either, you would be perfectly well adjusted by dinner. That's how it was. No mother said, what shall I make for you? No. Whatever was made had to be eaten in gratitude and happiness. And this was not a bad way of raising the child. This is actually a very healthy way, as it turns out. The child may not have thought at that time it was a good way. You know, thankfully it's not in charge. But it's a whole culture. This is what is called a thali culture. Like the same thing happens when you go to the restaurant. Thali means a non-chosen meal. Oh, but I thought I go to the restaurant to choose. Not in India. You don't go to choose. When you go at lunchtime, lunch is what is there for lunch. But what's for lunch? Lunch. This is what you argue with. You know, you say, khane mein kya hai? What is there to eat? Khana hai. Meal is there. He's not going to say what is there. Even if you make him do a Shirshasana and stand upside down, he's not going to tell you what is there. When it comes out, you see, there are 2 curries, vegetable curries, one wet, one dry, and one dal-like thing to pour over the rice, a nice little mountain of rice, chapatis, and some pickle, some little salad, cucumber, and little yogurt. Finished. Oh, but I don't like this particular vegetable here. Doesn't matter. Eat it. You have to eat it. Annam nanindyat. You can't waste it. Nanindyat means don't waste the food. Don't insult the food. Wasting the food is an insult. So unless, of course, there are some dire circumstances, stomach is not okay, or you're not well or something, or something is really allergic for you, other than barring those situations, don't waste the food. And to help you eat, he stands right there, you know, after having served it. Doesn't go away. And you have to eat it. And then you finish it all, and then you go. That's all it is. That's how one is raised. Because the ragadveshas you don't allow to proliferate, even culturally. This is the whole culture's backing is there for not just this kind of parenting, but this kind of being in the world. You go to buy something, you know. Let's say you go to buy a sari. First the person says, is it for yourself or is it for a friend to give as a present? Then if you say it is for a friend, then, you know, they will say, you sit down, I'll get you coffee or tea, I'll choose and pack it up. Because why should you care? It's for your friend. Just tell what colors your friend doesn't like. Okay, no more blues, no blues or reds. Okay, doesn't matter, I'll do it. And it's a surprise because you yourself don't know what's in the packet. If you say it is for yourself, and, you know, that the owner of the shop will call his whole family, he's running the shop. He'll call his wife, call his daughters if they are there, daughters or sons. He'll size the person up and decide what colors look nice on them. And here you are protesting, I hate green. But it looks so good on you. I don't care, I hate it. But you don't have to look at yourself. We have to look at you. And we like what we see. Then you go home with a green sari. This is how it happens. Even today in smaller areas. In big towns it is not like that anymore, because you know, that supermarket thing has come, you go pick what you like and all these things. That's not how it used to be. Going shopping for saris and things like that was like a big, what's the word for it? Experience in self-growth. Yeah. That's how it was. And if you say this doesn't look nice, they will argue with you. And they will make you wear it, drape it over the shoulder, take you out in the light, because the inside, you know, sometimes dim and small lights and the artificial light. Take you out in the light and then bring strangers into the conversation. How does this auntie here that has come to grace our shop look in this sari? And of course the strangers will also say, oh, this is wonderful, this is wonderful. But she's saying she doesn't like the color. Well, she should just get over it. So this lifestyle really has to do with getting over the ragadveshas. You jump a hoop. And the more ragadveshas you get over, the more they sit well behaved, with fingers on their lips, not saying a word. And the free will and the inner space increases, finally to let in this knowledge. So in order to be free, in order to discover yourself as totally free, you voluntarily give up the small freedoms of being able to act out in accordance to your ragadveshas. It's a paradox. It's a wonderful paradox, and something that one has to learn from. Very, very nice this is. So here in this country, operating and running the tape of ragadveshas is seen as freedom. But you have exchanged it for a bigger freedom of being untethered in any situation, of being able to adjust to any situation and to be free and malleable. You have exchanged that. What a sad exchange. So the key is coming back to this as a lifestyle. The key is to keep the ragadveshas so occupied that there is no time for them to express themselves. Oh, but is that not suppression? No, it's not suppression. It's a strategic way to not give in to them. Deferred gratification, it's called. How long deferred? Permanently deferred. Some things. Some things are permanently deferred. Some things you can tell yourself, next year we'll see. Next week, next month, it's okay. And when you defer the gratification, it no longer causes pressure. It's okay, I'll get it, maybe next year. But by the time next year comes, you don't want it at all. Because that's not what you wanted. What you want is this freedom. So deferred gratification, a healthy lifestyle based on actions that are not optional in nature but compulsory. A healthy lifestyle based on performing actions, those actions mindfully that are contributing to your well-being and your, whatever needs to be done in your life. So what are the compulsory actions? They are divided into two. Laukika and Vaidika. Laukika means so-called secular, Vaidika means spiritual. But that's why I said so-called, because the distinction is not really clear, and the distinction, as soon as it's made, is deliberately obfuscated. Because that is what makes this lifestyle into yoga and makes you, the follower of this lifestyle, into a yogi. The deliberate obfuscation of the sacred and the secular. Because we don't have something that is secular. Everything is sacred for us. Waking up in the morning, it's a sacred act. It's a great surprise that the waking up even happened. One could have slowly in the sleep drifted off to another loka. Didn't happen, correct? Still in this loka. And then what? Brushing of the teeth. Is it compulsory or not? Compulsory, definitely. If not for you, for others around you. Taking a shower, compulsory. Eating something, compulsory. So here, all these are highlighted. The mindful performance of that. And how do I make it mindful? Because it's very hard. It's easy to say, be mindful. I make it mindful. The only way of making it mindful is making it prayerful. When it is prayerful, it automatically becomes mindful. How to brush the teeth as an act of prayer. This is why the Gita is wonderful. It teaches you how to brush teeth as an act of prayer. Karmani eva adhikarahate. I only have a say over the brushing, not over the cavities. Correct? So that means what? I can just do my best. They say divide the mouth into 4 quadrants and brush for half minute in one place, and therefore you have to brush for 2 minutes. You can get all this know-how. Just like the physicist, estimating the velocity, the headwind, the tailwind, and still falling down on top of the lay person. So you can just do your best. Correct? You just do your best. And then, since you don't have a say over whether you are going to get cavities or not this time around, you just say, I'm not performing this action for my own sake. I'm not performing this action to not get cavities. Oh really? Then why to brush the teeth? Well, I'm dedicated this for Bhagavan. This is an act, an offering at the altar that is permanent, that is limitless, that is free, that is me, that I am in the process of trying to know. This is the altar which is the not just manifest as the law of the karma, but is the giver of the law of karma. So even though it sounds a little funny to say for Bhagavan's sake I am brushing the teeth, Bhagavan doesn't care whether you brush your teeth or not, literally speaking. But it is a way of not coming in the way of the action. Letting go of the action freely is to say, I dedicate it to Bhagavan. Meaning, the result of action are not in my hands, and the results of action are not in my hand. The action, how can it be in my hand? If everything is Bhagavan, the action is also in the hands of Bhagavan. So I give to Bhagavan what is already his due. So I dedicate the action to Bhagavan. So each act becomes an act of prayer. That's why I said there is a deliberate and a clever obfuscation of the secular and the sacred. Each act, I spiritualize, I Ishwarize the act. Each act I spiritualize by dedicating it to that from whom the ultimate result of action comes. That law, that manifestation and of that law, the giver of that law. And I can be free to just continue to do because I don't have that stress, because I have given it up. Very nice. And then whatever comes, I learn to take with equanimity. Siddha siddhau. Siddha siddhyau samo bhutva samatvam. Equanimity, the next verse. Yoga uchyate. That is one of the definitions of yoga. So whatever comes, whether it is quote-unquote success or quote-unquote failure, whatever comes, I learn to take it. And this is a process. First I will jump up and down. First I will try to trick it. I will try to change it. And when I know I cannot, I learn to grumble and take it. Forget glad acceptance. First there is grumbling acceptance. Oh no, not again. But okay, all right. So this is where the will is strengthened. The will is made strong enough against all the setbacks that my own duritas, my own bad karmas, offer these obstacle course. And so the will is made free enough to jump over those hoops without getting hurt without getting tired. So first I change all my actions into discrete acts of prayer. Step number 1. Step number 2, the attitude with which I perform all actions becomes prayerful. In other words, first the act was a prayer, now I become prayerful. Anything I do is prayerful. It's a process. More about it we'll see. Next class will be on 12th is a Sunday, 18th of April. Yeah, because I'm traveling to various places, so the weekend classes will be like that. Next class will be on the 18th of April. So till then we'll have something else for you in the program. Drigdrishya Viveka is continuing. Yeah, that is there. Saturday mornings, and then Wednesdays you can watch another DVD. You can Pujya Swamiji's. You can do that. So tomorrow we have we're starting a new text called Bodhasara. Not the whole thing, excerpts. And so this is a very interesting text. It was composed just before the British colonization of India, and even though it is extremely traditional, the way it is written, it has a very modern flair which is immediately evident, that we can all enjoy. And then also it has a lot of alliterations, poetry, highly poetic value. And the third thing about this text is that the person has a great sense of humor. All these things come out, and I hope you will join me for this Bodhasara, a very nice text that was hidden till now, discovered by Pujya Swamiji, and being taught here. So that class will meet once or twice a month, again depending on my travels. So tomorrow it will meet at 9:30, which is actually 8:30 because clock goes forward. Yeah, clock goes forward, so you have to wake up 1 hour early and come to class 1 hour earlier than you would have today. And then we have something called, in the tradition, we have something called Dvitiya Vigna. It means when you start a text, the second class should not be cancelled. Because if the number 2 is actually Lord Yama's domain. And what does Lord Yama do? Kills it. Okay? So that's all he does. Poor thing. So Dvitiya is in the hands of Yama. That date, nothing happens. Yeah. And so therefore, there is something called Dvitiya Vigna, an obstacle for the second class. And so we don't allow that to happen. So in that spirit, what I will do, I tried to come back on the 29th itself, on the 28th evening, but I was unable to do that. So, but however, I'll be here on 29th I hope to be here around midday. So if we can meet from 3:30 to 5, 3:30 to 5:30 on Sunday the 29th after tomorrow. So tomorrow, March 8th, and then March 29th, we will meet. And then after that, I'll give the other dates we will look at. Okay? Yeah. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Any questions? Yeah. Oh, that's okay. I know who you are. So nice to see all of you.
Well, I have a question. What's the name of that text again?
Bodhasara.
Bodhasara.
Yeah, Sara means essence. Bodha means knowledge, the essence of the teaching. Om. Some squares have come. Carib spirulina.